thanks to Sangam Talks for hosting me. And this is a very timely topic. I think the first communication came from Sangam Talks about a year, slightly over a year ago. And for some reason, that didn't happen. But I'm so glad that I'm here with this particular topic. Although 30 or 40 minutes is not enough time to treat this subject, because anything I say or people like me say, we are held accountable, we are held responsible. And this topic, this is a very big statement to make, that Christian conversions are a recipe for anti-India sentiments. To back that, we need a lot of evidences, which we have, not that we do not have, but I may not be doing justice to the topic and to my evidences, to the evidences that I'm going to present here in 30 or 40 minutes. But we can continue this dialogue. I'm just putting the evidences out there and try to connect it with Christian theology and Christian history, and see where these secessionist ideas come from. So I would like to go into the presentation. So, are Christian conversions a recipe for anti-India sentiments and secessionist ideas? Christians actually say no. And who is it that says no? So, who is this guy who says that there are deliberate attempts to depict Christians as anti-nationals? And he goes on to say that Christians are no less nationalistic or patriots than any other Indians. And he also claims that there is a sinister attempt to relate patriotism with religion. But let's see who's making this statement. This guy is Cyriac Joseph, and he had been a public servant who represented the highest seat of Indian judiciary, which is the Supreme Court. But does he stick to what he is claiming that the other party is doing, that the opposition, that is us, are doing? There are so many speeches online where he boasts publicly that his religion, his faith to Jesus, his Christian faith comes before the nation and his service to the nation. And this is the same person who always put religion before law in the most crucial cases, I must say. And one of the first things that comes to mind when you talk of Cyriac Joseph is how he went ahead and supported JNU students who had protested against the execution of Parliament attack convict Afzal Guru. And he also made several statements on several different platforms saying that these protests should not be considered as anti-national. The question is, if somebody attacks an outsider, somebody attacks the entire a building that actually represents the democracy of Bharat, and people are protesting against his execution, that person's execution, if that is not anti-national, what is? I don't understand. Then to protect his religious denomination, Catholic denomination, he was actually found in the narco test lab trying to tamper with the evidence in Sister Abhaya's case. And he, for as long as the case went on, and when he had the authority, he put all kinds of hurdles in the case just to save his fellow Catholics, knowing pretty well that they were guilty of killing Abhaya. And not much relevant, but this person is also reputed for leaving cases unresolved throughout his career. About 1,000 cases were left without judgment. The reason I'm making this point is to not expose, but just to display that what came first to him. Was it his service to the nation or his religion? And then we have another person, a person in a very authoritative position, a responsible position, supposedly. This is Jailal Austin. I haven't put names here on my slides deliberately, because these people, these are the face of, I must say, anti-nationalism, and they could be anybody. So this is the IMA chief, Indian Medical Association chief, John Austin Jailal. He made some statements like, uh, he when he came to that position of authority, he said that it's a very good, it's my opportunity to carry on the principles of Christian healing in the medical college as a principal of this college, as a professor in this college. And then he also says we need more Christian doctors to work in secular institutions, mission institutions, and medical colleges. And then he also talked about how it was the churches that was taking care of the sick during the pandemic, and the government has not come forward to support them. And who is he telling all these things to? A foreign Christian magazine. And he's always seen giving interviews to these magazines, and always trying to sling mud at the government of India, sometimes the culture of India, because he associates Sanskrit language with Hinduism. He says Sanskrit is Hinduism, Ayurveda is Hinduism, and which is what the government of India is doing, because they want to make it one nation, one system of medicine, and one religion. Now, the question is, who is trying to compare or bring in religion into state or secular affairs? It is them always. So they cannot leave religion out of their profession, out of their service to the nation, and then they blame, the oppositions, saying that the other party, saying that we are the ones who are trying to relate patriotism or our service to nation, our careers, our professions with religion. And then if those two people are holding responsible positions at the national level, we have some very, very disturbing statements from people at regional levels, like Andhra and Tamil Nadu, which are the most happening places for Christianity. So we have people giving out statements like, how many husbands does Bharat Mata have? 3 crore. The 3 crore deities are Bharat Mata's husbands. And this guy, he actually heads a proselytizing company. That's what I call the any Christian organization. And then there's another guy who actually is a founder of a Bible college, which is again a factory that churns out pastors. And he says that Indian flag is just a piece of cloth, and it must hang its head in shame in front of the flags flying outside my college. And people are mad to salute to it. And then he says national anthem sounds like the braying of a donkey. I'll get in a minute to why these people are important, and why and how what they say is impactful and influences a section of Bharat's population. And then this guy also works for the same college, Bible college. He said very recently, break India into two and give us one part. And then we will not have anything to do with you. We will not bother you. We will not, for example, vandalize your temples, which is happening a lot in Andhra these days. And then another guy from Andhra, he says, Britishers are our spiritual fathers. It is to them we owe everything. We must be indebted to them for everything. What have the rishis and munis done to us? They were just illiterate, superstitious, uncivilized primitives. And then this guy, he says idol worship is same as prostitution. Tsunami is God's revenge against idol worship, and India is poor because of idol worship. This guy also has ties with another very big, disturbing movement in in India, but I'll get to that in a minute. So these people, what they say definitely impacts, like I said, a big section of Indian population. And these are not statements made on their personal YouTube channels. These were the statements that were made in public speeches that, I mean, and these speeches went viral. So the big question we must be asking today in response to Cyriac Joseph's lamentation that we are attempting, there's a sinister attempt to brand them as anti-nationals. I would ask if these examples that I just shared, if that is not anti-India, those are not anti-India statements, what are? I would say anti-nationalism doesn't have a different look and sound. It doesn't wear a different attire. It doesn't stand out from people like us. It looks exactly like these people and sounds exactly like their words. That is anti-nationalism. I would say we don't need any more examples, and we will straight away go into where these ideas come from. And like I said, who are these people? There's the guy who commented on the national anthem and national flag. He's the founder of a Bible university which churns out dozens of pastors every year. And Cyriac Joseph is a retired representative of Bharat's judiciary. And this guy is president of Indian Medical Association, who compared Sanskrit, who said Sanskrit is Hinduism. We should never allow Sanskrit and Ayurveda to take over English language and modern medicine. And then there's another guy, the guy who said, how many husbands does Bharat Mata have? He runs a popular YouTube channel and has a subscription, several tens of thousands. And then this guy who said divide Bharat into two, he's also a pastor and a director of a Bible university. And this guy who said Britishers are our spiritual fathers, it is to them that we should be indebted and not to the sages or not to our sages who gave us the Shastras. He actually runs an apologetics enterprise and runs a YouTube channel, and a lot of Christian youth follow him blindly. Now, this guy is from Tamil Nadu, runs a proselytizing enterprise in Tamil Nadu, and he's famous and widely followed pastor. Now, cessationism is not a new or a modern concept to Christianity. It didn't happen in the 21st century. It has been there for as long as Christianity existed. In fact, Christianity is the reason, the cessationism, the idea to separate, is the reason Christianity is born in the first place. So it has both a theological basis and a historical precedent. Now, what is a theological basis? If you look at the Old Testament, the idea of a chosen race is strongly incorporated into the Old Testament, because the God of the Old Testament says that he commands his people to separate themselves from non-believers just to retain their sanctity. And when you come to New Testament, now the Bible has both New Testament and Old Testament. I don't think I'll have to go into that. But when you look at the New Testament, that is the beginning of the time of Jesus. So the New Testament, the very first Messiah believers, back then they were not called Christians. It would be, I think, 100 CE for that group of people who believed in a resurrected Savior were called Christians. So, in the very beginning stages, when the Christian religion was still in the was a small fringe group, Jerusalem had two groups of Messiah believers. One was the Aramaic-speaking Jewish converts who recently got converted to the cult of the resurrected Savior, and the other group was the Greek-speaking diaspora Jewish converts called the Hellenists. Now, the Hellenists began speaking against the law and the Jewish God. And this was a punishable offense. Knowing very well that this was a punishable offense, they still went ahead and spoke, because they had a sense of we are purer than the rest. You know, the chosen people separating themselves. It comes from the Old Testament, and it actually came to fruition in the New Testament. So even though they knew that it was a punishable offense under the Jewish law and the punishment was death by stoning, they still go ahead and speak against the law and the Jewish God, the law of that nation, and against the deity that that nation holds dear. So a believer called Stephen gets stoned to death by Jewish law for this very reason. And the other Hellenists secede at this point and move out of Jerusalem, and they take their religious beliefs with them. And that is how conversions began at that point. And the prelude to conversions of the rest of the nations around Jerusalem is cessationism. And there is a verse. There are several verses, but this is very apt to what I'm talking about, which says, "Come out from among unbelievers and separate yourselves from them. Don't touch their filthy things, and I will welcome you." So these are the words allegedly spoken by Jesus in the New Testament. He is specifically saying that separate yourselves because you are pure, you are a chosen race. Separate yourselves from everything that is filthy. Now, what is filthy according to the Bible? Idol worshippers. Because idol worshippers are, he equates, several verses, several writers in the Bible equate idol worshipping with prostitution. So that is filthy. So separate yourselves from those that are filthy and do filthy things, and I will welcome you. That is when I will embrace you. That is when I will welcome you into my kingdom, into my fold, whatever he means there. So that's a very, very specific statement that he has made, asking anybody who wants to be embraced by Jesus to separate themselves from the rest. So you see where the whole idea comes from. Now, the historical precedent is, if you look at the first century, the birth of Christianity itself comes out of this idea. A group of Jews secede from Judaism to form a new religion. Much later, anti-Semitism by later Christian generations, that is Protestants, comes about, and that results in the Holocaust of Jews, the mother race from which Christianity secedes. The reason I'm putting this out there is, anytime a group separates from the mother group, they cannot go live by themselves practicing their version of purity. They have to abuse, they have to demonize, and in extreme situations, they have to annihilate the mother race from which they seceded. And if you look at the 5th century, so Eastern Schism, it's called, a group of Christians within the Eastern Orthodox Church of the Eastern Roman Empire, which is, at this point, the Roman Empire was split into Eastern and Western. So a group of Christians secede from the rest of the Orthodox Church. So this is a secession happening from within the group, a same group. And then 11th century, we see a East-West schism. The Eastern Christians, led by the church at Constantinople, secede from the mother church, the Western Church, led by the church in Rome, which is now called the Roman Catholic Church at Vatican. And 16th century is Protestantism. Again, Martin Luther protests and secedes from the Catholic Church, which is the mother church. So time and again, this is a pattern that you see, that anytime a group thinks that we are purer than them, we have to form a separate, we have to retain our sanctity, our purity, they secede from the mother group. And like I said, they don't keep quiet after the secession. They have to abuse and make sure that the mother source is annihilated, and they'll do everything in their capacity to see that happens. So now I use the word schism. So just to give you an idea of what schism is, it was used in the early church to describe those groups that secede from the mother church and established rival churches. And if you look at the Christian history, there have been many, many more secessions. I've just talked about 4 here, the major ones. Throughout Christian history, there have been many secessions, and those secessions resulted in creation of about 40,000 brands of Christianity in 2000 years based on just one book and one school of thought. So what are we seeing here? Secession is seen as a pursuit of a God-given liberty. So they take it as their birthright. They take it as their duty towards their religion. And continuing on the historical precedent, the most effective inspiration for modern Christians, Indian Christians, for Christians, the Indian Christians comes from the history of their spiritual fathers, alleged spiritual fathers, that is the Europeans. A group of Christians called separatists. They call themselves separatists. Separatists seceded from the Anglican Church, which is the Church of England, which was the mother church. They sailed all the way from Holland to America, which they colonized by annihilating the natives, just to establish a supposedly purer version of Christianity. So this, as I said, is a pattern. Anytime they see that, this could be, we are the chosen people, we have to continue the purity, we have to continue the sanctity. So at that point, they secede. And much later in America, after they settled there, smaller groups seceded from the very first Christian settlers, forming into different denominations that we hear of today. Baptists, Presbyterians, Lutherans, Methodists, Pentecostals, and many, many other subgroups. So seeking purity through secession has marked Christian religious history. And when I talk about these denominations, I want to make a point here that these are not different schools of thought shooting off into varied religious philosophies, unlike Sanatan Dharma. I mean, you could come back and ask me, there are several offshoots of Hinduism. So what is the problem with the denominations or secessions? Now, if you look at Christianity, the offshoots, the denominations of Christianity, they are all based on the same school of thought, unlike Sanatan Dharma's different schools of thought. And that thought is that Jesus is the one true God and in him alone is salvation, and the Bible is the only true scripture. Now, this is very different. I mean, I don't want to get into the philosophical aspects of it, but this is very different from the different schools of thought in how the different schools of thought came about in Sanatan Dharma. And all these divisions within Christianity are the result of internal disagreements on some of the very core aspects of Christianity, or the Christian religion. But if you look at the different schools of thought, at least in the Astic schools of thought, they all agree on the core aspects, the reincarnation, karma, dharma, and all those aspects. But in Christianity, the disagreements are on as core an issue as where does the Holy Spirit proceed from? Does it come from the Father, or does it come from the Son, which is Jesus? Or something like, was Jesus divine, or was he just a man? So these are some of the core issues that they disagreed on, and that is when they walked out of the mother group and formed their group, and based on what they believed to be true about the Christian religion. And this I've already mentioned, that every time one group secedes from the mother for theological reasons, it claims to be purer than the mother. And the seceded group begins to demonize the mother, and this results in a discord and chaos in society. Now, I'll explain as we go forward. Now, how does conversion lead to secession? Like you might ask me, it's all divine. I mean, because they have experienced the love and compassion of Jesus in some miraculous manner, that is when conversions happen. But that's not what is happening here. So for that, we'll have to understand what conversion is and how conversions happen. So what is conversion? In the general sense, it's a shift from what one believes to be true about God, about the relationship of the self with God, the destiny of one's soul and Atma, soul/Atma. So this is in the broader sense what conversion is. Now, when does conversion happen, especially in the Indian context? I would say 99.99% of the times, conversion to Christianity happens when one person preaches about Christianity to another person. It's never a self-discovery, self-learning. So nobody discovers for themselves that Bible preaches about salvation of God or salvation through Jesus, unless and until someone tells about Christianity or about the Bible. Conversions don't happen. So when I say preaches about Christianity, I have to also define what preaching is, again in the Indian context. The act of pointing out that a person's current beliefs are a path to eternal hell. So the consequences of not converting, or the consequences of one's current beliefs, are going to give that person eternal hell. So the act of pointing this out is preaching. Shaming a Hindu for his, her traditions, cultural and religious practices, a big part of preaching in India. Then the process of persuading a Hindu to abandon his, her beliefs, traditions, and identity. Our preaching is also teaching a Hindu to demonize everything that he, she has abandoned. And then it's the act of indoctrinating a potential convert that his, her former religion is the reason for his or her current misery, financial distress, or health related issue, domestic, marital. So the current misery can be mitigated only by converting to Christianity. So this is in the broader sense what preaching entails in India. So there are two things. As long as you're talking about, a person is talking about the goodness of Christianity, or the love and compassion of Jesus, that's fine. But preaching is just not about talking about the goodness of Christianity. It is mostly, I would say more than 50%. It is to point out why a Hindu must abandon. And in the process, they demonize everything that Hindu does. Now, what does conversion do to a person? It creates identity crisis, both in terms of his or her consciousness, and it gives rise to conflict and internal conflict. And it severs, when a person converts or is trying to convert, he severs the familial bond with those that haven't converted, because their idol worshipping is equated with prostitution. And this is where preaching begins. Every preaching begins with why idol worshipping has to be abandoned. And the moment they say that, they point to the verses. I'm talking about the preachers. They point to the verses in the Bible that call idol worshipping as prostitution. So when a person converts, the first thing the first difference that he sees between himself and the rest in his family that haven't yet converted is they are idol worshippers and he is not. And then severing the familial bond results in loss of obligation towards family. Like they cannot attend funerals, they cannot attend any Hindu festivals, and they cannot partake in any of those events that have pujas, which is basically every event in Hinduism. So there is a loss of obligation, which in turn results in severing of societal bond that is rooted in families and family events in India, and which in turn results in the severing of civilizational bond. So when a person converts, so he is slowly distancing himself from first his family, and through his family, the obligation that he has as a family member, And by that, he's severing his societal bond because he's in that society, he's in the Hindu society, he distances from there. And through this, the entire civilizational bond is lost, the cultural bond is lost. And when this happens, simultaneously, while this is happening, he is establishing a new bond. And towards that new bond, his loyalty is shifted. His or her loyalty is shifting. And then at this point, he is, and just get this, all through this journey, conversion doesn't happen overnight. So all through this journey, the church is playing a very important role in all those, in doing all those things that I just said. I said, like preaching, what is a person preaching to a Hindu? So all these 5 points are happening simultaneously in this journey, and which results in not just this, but also establishing a bond with the new traditions, and at the same time feeling shameful about what he had been for all these years or generations. And this shame inspires aversion to his or her religious traditions. So what happens at the psychological level? What happens at a psychological level? There is a shift in philosophy of that person. I'm a different person now. My purpose is different now. Because again, part of the preaching is also to inculcate a new purpose in that person. And what is that purpose? That is to serve my God, to please my God. Remember, God said he will embrace only when one distances oneself from all the filthy things. And filthy things, again, are idol worshipping, which translates to Hinduism. So my purpose now is to serve my God, which is to please my God, which will happen only when I detest my past traditions, detest my past Hindu traditions. So I have no obligation to the family or the society that doesn't serve the same God as I. I am to condemn the native traditions because they are an abomination to my God. I am against everything that my God is against. I am with Jesus' army. Okay, this is a very important thing. It says every Christian thinks that he has enrolled himself upon conversion. He has enrolled himself into Jesus's army, and the Jesus army thinks that they're constantly at war with the dark forces of this world. And one of the first and foremost dark forces of this world are idols and idol worshipping, which again translates to the belief and culture of our civilization. So the person thinks that I'm in Jesus' army, and Jesus and the army is constantly at war with the beliefs, and I'm also constantly at war with these beliefs and culture. And I will do everything in my capacity to defeat these forces or annihilate them. So just imagine if there we were talking of only one person, one conversion. But imagine when this number increases in a particular region. When I say this number, I mean people with this kind of shifted philosophy, shifted purpose. When that increases in a particular region, what happens? The church has automatically gained control over that region. And what happens when the church gains control over a region? It begins to meddle in the affairs of the state. What happens when the church meddles in the affairs of the state? Takeover of education, entertainment, and media, we've already seen that in our country, is the first step. That's the milder version of the milder consequence. And then when that is taken over, they are able to influence the policies of a country, of the region. And we see examples like a Sterlite protest, a Bhima Koregaon incident, or a demand for Nagalim. I'm not going into the details of what these are because of time constraints. I'm presuming that these have been on the media for so long and so strong that I'm sure all the people listening to this conversation, this talk, know what they are and what they have done to the country. So when taking over of education, entertainment, media happens, it can instigate people to do a protest, like a Sterlite protest, or the Bhima Koregaon incident, a demand for a separate state, country. And the extreme step would be a Rwanda genocide like thing. Now, my question is that what is next for Bharat? Because the examples that I have given are from India, they're not from outside India. So we've already seen that part. We've seen the prelude to that takeover of our education, slowly our entertainment, mostly our media. So we just are one step away from this, the Rwanda kind of situation. None of us that are listening to this conversation would want to see Bharat go there. We do not want those pages in our history books. So I feel it's time for Bharat to check where she is and what can be done to prevent a Rwanda-like situation anytime in future for millennia to come. So my suggestion would be, the solution at this point in time I see at the government. I mean, of course, the solution has to come at the government level. The introduction of anti-conversion bill. A lot of people are talking about why anti-conversion bill is not required. But I would say it is required, and the time is now. Now, Article 25, everybody talks about Article 25 and the right, the fundamental right to propagate religion. So the propagating activity, we're not against the Article 25 or the fundamental right of propagating religion, but that article has to be more specific. For example, propagating activity must be limited to churches. Preach as much as you want, indoctrinate as much as you want, but do it within the confines of your churches. Stop going door to door. The door to door propagation, the street level propagation must be put an end to. Then change in the wording of Article 25. Propagating must be differentiated from inducement based conversions, and inducement based conversions has to be made a punishable offense. The third thing is, the Supreme Court has already said this, that the Article 25 does not grant the right to convert, but one may transmit or spread one's religion by an exposition of its tenets. But as I said, what does preaching entail? What does promoting Christianity entail? It entails offending the civilization of this country, offending the traditions and beliefs of this country. Exposition of Christianity's tenets is just a small part in the act of preaching. And this has to be stressed, this particular point, that one may spread or transmit one's religion by exposition of its tenets. I would say only, with a capital only by the exposition of its tenets. And any derogatory remark, which I would say should be another totally different bill, which is the anti-demonization of the Indigenous Traditions Bill. The anti-demonization of Indigenous Traditions Bill, that must be brought into place, where any derogatory remark against Hindu traditions or deities, such as we hear this all the time, especially in the churches or street level evangelism, like Ma Kali being called a bloodthirsty goddess, or Ganesha being called the elephant god, the monkey god for Hanuman. So such remarks must be made an offense. Like in the case of addressing an individual by his caste has been made a punishable offense. Don't deities deserve that kind of respect? So any derogatory remark against a Hindu god or goddess must be made a punishable offense. And the Drugs and Magic Remedies Act of 1954. This must be applied to Christian healing. The act actually says, if you go and look at this act, it says that any claims of any objects used as promoted as having magical powers is an offense. Promoting any object to be having magical powers to alleviate human problems must be made an offense. Now, what is Christian healing all about? They are selling handkerchiefs. They are selling prayer oil. They sell water, holy water, and call them to be, claim that these objects have miraculous powers and they can heal people. And the healing charades that go on across the country. All these things must be put an end to, and the act, the Drugs and Magic Remedies Act, must be applied to them, against them. So this list is not exhaustive. There are several other ways that the government can step in and control this, not because the Christian population is rising, but because it is definitely a threat to India's security. This is the reason I feel the government should step in and bring about these changes. At individual level also, I see a lot of activities that can be undertaken, like demand for these changes. Begin with making a demand for these changes in our constitution and bring these conversations to mainstream. Engage yourself, act with awareness, become aware of what is happening, become aware of what can happen, become aware of what should be done so we don't get to the situation I was just talking about. When you become aware, you know where we are going, you know where we are at today, which is very disturbing. You know where we are headed if we don't do anything right now. So there is a lot that can be done at individual level. The first thing would be to wake up from our sleep and become aware, alert those that are still sleeping, and talk about it. Talk about it as much as you can on social media, and you can present your demands in a polite manner. So just do it. Just do everything in your capacity to urge the government to make these changes. So with that, I come to an end of my talk. Like I said, I could give you many more examples from across the country of how there is a rising anti-nationalist sentiment among Christians, neo-converts. But I didn't want to dwell much on those that particular topic, that particular aspect of this talk, because to discuss them, we'll have to discuss the context in which they have said those remarks, made those remarks. So that would take longer than the 30-40 minutes that Sangam Talks gave me. So Tanya ji, over to you.
Thank you so much, Esther ji, for that really eye-opening talk. I just have one quick question that I would like to put across. As you said, that we should make ourselves aware and we should wake up and we should politely put it across to the government. Now we see things happening like in the Gurgaon Namaz issue that is happening, where they had to fight for so many days, despite having orders for not doing namaz, they're against the system. And also people getting arrested from the Hindu community, and the other ones brazenly, doing, even though there is a Indian Hindu Hindutva that they say, the government that is there. And also so there is a lot of things against you if you stand up and demand any of these things, or even if you ask politely. Like recently, a journalist, Mari Das, just because he criticized the Tablighi Jamaat, he's been arrested. So what exactly, I mean, we expected something with the 2014 dispensation that has come in, but we don't see the political will happening. And so I would like to hear your comment.
Like I said, I stress on this point that being polite doesn't actually mean you can be polite and you can still be firm. You can stand your ground. So politeness is just for the how you're presenting your point firmly. We've also seen changes. Like, for example, if you look at the Sabarimala incident, I think Sai Deepak ji stepped up, and if that could happen, why not other things? But there is a way to do it. I'm not saying every social media warrior should go out and protest there on social media or use derogatory language to make things happen. There is a way to make it happen. Like, for example, I have given the historical precedent, I have given the example of how these statements are becoming mainstream conversation in Christian circles. I mean, abusing the national flag, making derogatory statements about Bharat Mata. They are not being held accountable. Begin there at least. So, in your region, there is a pastor who has made this statement, doesn't make national headlines, but within the region, you can raise your voice and talk about it, maybe file a complaint. So, the key here is to not just hush it up under the carpet, but to talk about it. Talk about it, share about it, make a conversation around it. And there are organizations now that are willing to step forward, like Legal Rights Protection Forum is doing a very good job of filing complaints about this. Anything, any small, big, any stray incident that occurs in villages, towns, cities across at least Andhra and Telangana, the two Telugu states. I think they've also done a few complaints against at the national level, against people at the national level. Get in touch with those people, at least make them aware of what is happening in your vicinity. So, talking about it or urging the government always does not mean protesting or using force. But I do understand what you mean. When that person was arrested or killed just because he raised voice against Tablighi Jamaat.
Thanks, Estherji, for this wonderful talk. So, I mean, at the end, you showed us some of the government measures that the government can take. So, my question is, now there is also a lot of folks working on Ghar Vapsi, right? So they are bringing back the Christians back to Hinduism. So first thing is, I mean, how prominent it is, or I mean, I know these numbers don't come out in open, but do you have any number, and what is the rate Christians? I mean, what is the rate people are leaving Christianity, and also is this Ghar Vapsi also a solution to a certain extent to the problems that you mentioned? Because I mean, the government part, that would be kind of a slow and painful process, right? The government route. So I mean, in the meantime, I mean, is this thing also solution to a certain extent to the problems that you mentioned? So what are your thoughts on that?
Yes, definitely. No doubt that if you wait for the government to take action, it might, it could be, we may not see changes in our lifetime. But what the work that is happening at grassroots level, like you said, those numbers don't come out for several reasons. there's a risk in actually we don't know the exact number at what rate it is happening because we do not have a database. We haven't come up with any database like that, but the work is going on, and the organizations that are engaged in this kind of activity want to lay low for obvious reasons. And also, to maintain a database or to put a number to it, you need to have a system in place, and we don't have that system right now. We don't have something like a Joshua project for to record this, to make this, to maintain this database. So, but yes, that is also one of the, not one of the I would say a great solution. If you know of any organization working in your region, I would actually recommend you to get in touch with them and do whatever you can, because what I have seen working with interacting or working with grassroots organizations is people are willing to come back. They are vexed. You and I know that there is no miraculous solution to human problems. A human problem can only have a human solution. I'm not saying there is nothing happens by faith, or prayer cannot change things. That's a separate discussion. But I'm talking about, if you have cancer, if one has cancer, one has to go to the doctor, one has to do whatever it takes. I mean, yoga, meditation, Ayurveda, modern medicine, whatever it takes, but they're all human solutions to those problems. You would have to go. You cannot just kneel down and pray and expect your cancer to be gone. So people are slowly beginning to understand that. They are beginning to see the reality that no prayer, no pastor, no church, or no donation to the church is going to alleviate their problem. So it is on us now that we go to them and tell them that we are with them. Tell them that not all is lost, they can still come back. So these organizations are doing that task, and that is a great solution to this entire problem.
Madam Mr. Dhanraj, yours was an excellent exposition from a young lady I'm yet to hear. It is because you know both Hinduism and Christianity. You deserve a Padma Shri, Padma Shrimati. My good wishes to you. My questions are, after your suggestions to government. 1. Are Dalits entitled to reservation after converting to Christianity? Related questions are, if answer to my question is yes, is not a reason for conversion. Second related question is, if that is so, is such conversion of gullible people illegal, and is it not present, as is the question of Lata in chat box? And is this not the philosophy that of Muslims? I request to you and Rahul ji to present your lecture in brief in one page for circulation, for wide circulation. Thank you.
Actually, no. There is also a lot of work going on to remove reservations once a person converts, because when a person converts, he loses his caste status. He loses his caste. I think they all become BC. They come under BC. So whatever reservations BCs have, only that can go to that person that has converted. But caste-based reservations cannot. They're not eligible for caste-based conversions. That's also a very big argument, especially in the states of in the Telugu-speaking states. That has become a very big problem, and I think Legal Rights Protection Forum is also it's fighting individual cases in that aspect. They are not eligible for, especially people that caste is Hindu, right? Casteism, caste. Only Hindus are segregated into caste, categorized into caste. So once a person becomes a Christian, he loses status. He's not a Hindu anymore. So is that your question, which I answered already?
Yes, I think so. Yeah.
Yeah.
My last point was you explained this philosophy of succession by Christians. Is it not the same philosophy propagated by Muslims?
Well, we're not talking about Islam here. I can only talk about what I have studied. So Christians have a historical precedent, which I have given the examples of. If you ask me, is this not what the Muslims also do, Islam also does, I'll have to look into the history of Islam.
Christians have been converting for the last 2,000 years, and they have more or less perfected their role in doing this in various different continents and different social groups. Are there any specific groups working over in India who are targeting the Indian populace for this? Any specific groups? Dr. Joshua, people who have all the statistics and all that. I think it must be an organization somewhere in US or UK or somewhere. Any Indian organizations like that? You also made a statement that of a pastor saying something and it becoming the talking point in that Christian circle in that small little village or a town. How often does this happen?
So we already,
Christian organizations, specifically, we have heard about evangelists. Now, who exactly are these evangelists? I mean, Indians in this, or does it an organization from somewhere outside?
yes. So are these organizations all funded from outside, or are there some Indian ones that have organically grown? Is that your question, Colonel Rama?
Yes, something like that. Yes.
It is a mixture of both. There was a time when a lot of foreign funding used to come into the country. Now, with changed, I think, FCRA laws, we are not seeing that problem as much. So, how Christian churches, their model is in such a way that initially the funding comes from outside, then every funding organization gives a particular time to the local Indian organization to become self-sustained. So there is a thing called tithing, tithe. The 10% of a believer's income goes to the church. Every month, the believer, if there are 4 members from a family going to the church, it's 10% into 4 of their income goes to the church. I mean, earning member. If all the 4 are earning members from one family, each one gives their 10% of the income to the church. So this is how the church gets revenue. Plus, there are weekly offerings. Every week, when a person goes to the church, there is a particular hour of time, 10-15-minute time, where the church collects offerings. So churches become self-sustained very easily, very fast. So initially, the funding may come from foreign organization, but soon they become self-sustained and they have a lot of money because a lot of wealthy people are also becoming Christians these days and they start going to church.
So, Estherji, you're saying that all of them start from foreign support. So there's nothing that has organically sprung up in India which is not connected with anything, but they are just so zealous that they fund their own things and they start up without any kind of outside support. Is there any?
Not necessarily. Not necessary that every Christian organization that we see today has been funded by a foreign organization. No. There are many organically developed churches, established churches in the country.
And who are behind those? Like, who are the people who are getting them set up here in India?
When I convert, I am motivated to start a church of my own, right? So again, this is a mixture of people. Some of them truly believe in the Christian message and want to spread it. So they start a church. Some know the monetary benefit of starting a church. So they start a church. Some like that fame, that name and fame, standing up on at a podium and addressing a crowd, crowd in thousands. So they go ahead and start a church. So this is a mixture of people. Why what motivates one to start a church?
Thank you, Esther ji. And Colonel Rama's next question was about the. You said that whenever such incident happens where a pastor says something, very horrible, then there's a discussion that happens in the small village or something. You said it's been happening in the community. So how often does that happen? And what are the liberties that one can discuss?
Okay, all the examples that I gave are from mostly from the south, two south states. Andhra, Telangana, and Tamil Nadu. So these are people with decent following. They speak great English. They're good in their English. They're good in their regional language. So to answer how often it happens, all those statements, most of the statements were during a public debate or publicly when they were addressing a group of conference of Christians or on their YouTube channel. So how often it happens? As often as they want to make it happen. All of them own studios. Most of them own YouTube channels. So a church is like a media company, also plays the role of a media company. And a church's audience or a pastor or a Christian organization leader's audience are his community of believers that may or may not attend his church, but they are followers of his YouTube channel, his talks and all that. Not everything, again, this might happen in villages, and in India has many villages, right? So a lot of it may not come to mainstream media also, or it may not come out. They happen every day, everywhere, in every church across the country.
And also from the other side, you said that now Christian community is waking up and they're having these discussions and becoming aware. So is this more prevalent in the urban areas or the villages where they start to question these pastors' comments? So how frequent is that, and what are the dynamics of?
Okay, so when a person or a family is associated with church, the tendency to question is dead. Question the pastor especially is dead, because there is this constant indoctrination happening that God is the highest and pastor is his representative. A pastor garu is a respectful term in Telugu. So he should not be questioned because he is led by the Holy Spirit to do God's service. So even if a family or an individual wants to question, that fear is constantly there. Well, he is a representative of God. He is a man of God. I cannot question him and earn God's wrath. So that indoctrination is happening. But like I said, there is the feeling. I don't say it's an open discussion among Christians at village level. I'll give you an example. When a pastor goes to a village, he goes on a bicycle. Okay. And he's not married, he's single. He cannot take the family to his place of work, which is the village, because he cannot afford to take care of them. So he goes alone on a bicycle. Within a year, he buys a two-wheeler. Maybe in a couple of more years, he buys a car, and then comes a building, a 2-story, 3-story. But the villager who became a Christian after the pastor went to the village is in the same situation 5 or 6 years down the line. So no divine miracles, no benefit from the church or the pastor, but he sees the pastor growing. So they are questioning this aspect of it. We did not get any divine benefit. We did not get any material benefit. So what are we doing here? Abandoning our, civil culture. And also there is this fear, they're not much educated. They don't have much exposure. So there is this, the philosophy is also that, oh, maybe we abandoned our ancestors' religion, maybe that is a cause of our misery. So all these things, different, a combination of a variety of things working on the psychology of the convert at the rural level is what is actually making them come back. But then again, they won't come back on their own. There has work has to be done. Somebody needs to go sit with them, talk to them, and work with them. Like I said, you have to go and say that we are there for you. Not all is lost. You can still come back. Until that happens, they are not going to come back.
But Estherji, isn't there a converse to this? Like, I mean, converse and a counter view to it. Like, they probably might think that we are not as pious as the pastor, and there's something that is lacking, and we have to become like him. Then God will be showering their blessings on us. I mean, I'm just playing a devil's advocate.
Yes, I understand. So the believer thinks that maybe because he or she is not as pious as the pastor, okay, that doesn't come much. That's not part of the convert's psychology, because the convert is doing everything that the pastor has told them to do. They give their tithe more often than not. They give the weekly offerings. They go to church every Sunday. They take the entire family. They have converted a couple in their community, which is they have saved a few people for the glory of God. So they do everything that the pastor has said. And they also emulate the pastor in the piety, in his piety. Whether the pastor is pious or not, at least to show off, he is in the public image of a pastor is that he is pious and is a godly person. So this philosophy is very rare. This psychology, this thinking is very rare in the community. But maybe there is a percentage who also thinks like this. I cannot rule that out. But this kind of thinking that हमें भी वापस जाना है, घर वापस जाना है, that kind of feeling comes after much speculation, after a long process, thought process, after several discussions or introspection and all that. So maybe that is also a part of the thinking. Maybe I'm not as pious as him. That's why God is not working in the way that he should. But it says, the Bible also says, which the pastor may have already told them, preached to them, that faith as big as a mustard seed is enough for me to embrace you.
Good morning. Thanks for giving me that opportunity. I don't have a question, but I have a remark to make. I'm a professor based in Delhi for last 35 years, but I was born and brought up in Lucknow, and having gone to all the Roman Catholic schools, we never realized, that this would take a turn like this in our later part of life. My observation is that we were very happy studying in that school right through to the college level, and then moved on. We never discriminated between our class fellows, etc., etc. And then now I live in Vasant Kunj area, where within a radius of 3 or 4 kilometers there are at least 3 or 4 huge churches which have sprung up. They every Republic Day or every Independence Day, Christians, they bring out a fantastic night march and singing our national anthem, etc., which is a very good sign to see and notice. But yes, I agree that at this time, what Esther is doing, this kind of a requirement definitely has come up after so many years of our life. I noticed that there are some very good people, very highly placed people like IPS Robera, or I know of a Air Vice Marshal, who's a Christian and retired from the services, etc. We look up to those people, but yes, slowly and gradually we realize that one of my friends is in an intercaste marriage with a Christian girl, and there the children are indoctrinated just as among other castes. They are indoctrinated to call Hanuman as the monkey god, and things like that, which is very disappointing. So yes, of course, I am stressing that in a way, what Esther is doing is right, but this needs to follow up in a very disciplined and calm and cool manner. I would never encourage or appreciate what Bajrang Dal does and what Steins had to face. So these are some acts which spoil or tarnish our reputation as Hindus, and so we are all very patience loving and peace loving people. This is what I say. And so, coming to the point that even Modi ji had gone to Europe and he met the Pope, and Vatican he went and he invited over the Pope, who so well received our Modi ji as Prime Minister. These are some very good, humble developments. But yes, we need to pursue and stress on the fact that all what we are now, all what Esther is advocating, percolates down from people at the higher level, down to the lower level, down to the grassroots level people, and this kind of conversion need be checked by very peaceful means. That's my take. So I appreciate what Esther and the organization is doing, and this must go on the social media, etc. And that's my take on it. Thank you.
I just say that I never find that I've got enough from her. She's a really learned person on Christianity. And I request you to write your thoughts in the form of your books so that we can go to it again and again and become masters like you. Because one Esther Johnson is not enough. You need many like you to keep on the fight. Second thing that I will say is that you always have delineated very clearly what the problem is, how the Christian missionaries are working over the years. But now the challenge is how to bring back our own people. Now I want your thoughts to see that how this process can be done, how we can bring back our people, how can we counter their arguments. One set of arguments that they make that are respect to Hinduism, that can be in any way answered with respect to the text that we study. And here also I do some my bit of it. But second part is the kind of the aspects they quote from their books, how we can counter them, how can counter their arguments, and how can we bring back our people. That's a challenge. What is your solution for that at this point?
First of all, thanks for the kind words you said. Yes, the book will happen soon. I'm trying to put together more than one book. You said what the solution is yourself. Bringing them back is the solution. But how do you bring them back? Just do what they do, door to door. The only way you can talk to a person is by talking to a person. So no matter how many videos like this go, how many books get published, ultimately it's the person at the rural level that is the victim. So a rural person doesn't have the time or the wherewithal to sit in front of a video and watch it till the end. And this work is for a different purpose. But if you want to bring back the guy in the rural area, you have to go to the rural area. And my favorite line to express that is get your hands dirty. The only way to bring them back is when you get your hands dirty, when you go to the rural area. If you know of any organization working at the grassroots level, get in touch with them. Do whatever you can. Your time, your skill, your money, whatever you have. Or your social media following also can help them. Promote them, get funds for them, collect funds for them. So that is one way of doing it. And you said, yes, it is a multi-pronged approach. One is to say, why X is not good and has to be abandoned. The other thing is to say why Y is good and has to be embraced. So now most of us are well equipped to say why Y is good and has to be embraced. But most of us do not know how to say that X is not good and it has to be abandoned. So that is where the problem lies. The solution to that is there is a ton of information published online, not much by Indians maybe, but a lot of people from the West have published a ton of content online. So talking about why Christianity is not what it presented itself to be. So read that literature, watch those videos, make notes, and be prepared with answers when you find maybe your relative, your neighbor, or your colleague falling prey to the to proselytization. So you equip yourself with those arguments. There are typically 2 or 3 arguments that you need to get equipped with, like Jesus is the only way to salvation, idol worshipping is not good. I have made myself videos on how to counter idol worshipping argument. The idol worship is demon worship kind of argument of Christians. So equip yourself with that literature. Become aware of how they are converting. What are the lines or arguments or the scripture that they are using to convert? So there are so many resources. There are so much of content. You just have to sit down and watch them and make notes.
Namaste, Estherji. It was a great talk. I have a question related to Alokji and some other comments. I studied in a Hindu school. Most of my friends were Christians actually, so they studied with me only. So they go to church and they do all the puja with us, and till date we are good friends. After listening to your talks, I got enlightened in the theology or the Christian ideology. So how do I should I counter them, or should I just start the conversation regarding this? And one more is, one of my far relative converted to Christianity. So after listening to your talks, I went to the immediate family and asked them if they come back, will you guys accept them? So their answer was no. So what is the your thoughts on this?
Are you saying the Christian that converted refused to come back?
No, the immediate family is not accepting them. I just went to the immediate family and I had a chat with them. So the brother is converted. Their family is not ready to accept them back.
Converted to Christianity, but the Hindu family is not ready to accept them.
Yeah.
Isn't that a natural reaction for a family?
No, I just told them this is the, to my knowledge, I told them this might be the problem, this might be the situation. But still, I don't know. So, yeah, it's just immediate, my observation, I'm just sharing with you.
Yes. So yes, that is the most natural reaction that a family will give to an incident like this. When a kin of yours gets converted, the first reaction is you're upset with it, it hurts you, you're disturbed with it. And I would say this is just a phase with the Hindus being inherently tolerant and, sab kuch chalta hai, sabhi dharm ek jaise hai kind of attitude. This phase may not continue for long. But the solution would be to try and talk to that person. and find a middle ground. So unless the family doesn't mind severing ties with that kin of theirs. So I think it is an individual thing, Rohitji, whether they want to accept that person or not. But personally, if you ask me, I would say sit down with that person, talk to him, try to understand where he's coming from or what is his motivation to get converted. But all caution has to be taken to make sure that the rest of the he doesn't succeed in converting the rest of the family. This usually happens.
Yeah, I'm from Karnataka.
Okay.
So I think like the situation is not so bad compared to other states, I think. But he has converted recently, maybe 5-6 years back. So I knew that, but I was okay with that because I knew most of the friends around me. So that was the situation. So because of the social media, we are getting away.
Exactly. That's another thing. The Hindu family would not have reacted like this if all this information was not there on social media about Christianity today.
Rohit's first question was, Estherji, that he has studied in a Hindu school and not a convent school, I mean, and he had a lot of Christian friends also studying there. And since he's come to know about all these things about Christianity, he wants to start a conversation with them. And how does he go about it in order to, bring them towards this knowledge?
You can start the conversation, but don't start it before you are well equipped with how to counter their arguments. In a typical scenario, you shouldn't be in a position where you have to shut your mouth when they counter argue. So if they have called the Hanuman the monkey god, you should be able to tell why that is not the right word and what is the right word to refer to Hanumanji. That is one aspect. The other thing is when they are confidently telling that Jesus is the only way to salvation, you should be in a position to say why Jesus cannot be the only way to salvation. So you understand the two aspects? Like I was talking about Y and X. You should be able to tell why the X that they have embraced has to be abandoned. At the same time, you should say why the Y that they have rejected is actually the correct thing to embrace.
Yeah, my question was, they are okay to do puja, like we were doing Saraswati puja and all. We do Ganesha puja in our home. They come and they do puja, but they still go to church.
How long back was this?
Maybe 5-6 years back. Still, we are friends. He knows all the Ramayana and all the stories. So we discuss on that. But still, he goes to the church.
Okay. So the Christians are different kinds, Rohitji. In the context in which we are speaking, I will divide them into two. So there is a very conservative, Bible-believing, Jesus is the only true God kind of believing Christian, and then there is a liberal Christian, just like a liberal Hindu. सब कुछ चलता है, सभी धर्म एक है, क्या फर्क पड़ता है? So this liberal Christian doesn't mind going to a Hindu friend's festivals, but the conservative Christian would never step into a puja or eat the prasad. So maybe your friends belong to that liberal category of Christians, but just because a person is going to church, it doesn't make him a conservative Christian. Church is more like a social club, Church is a habit of a Christian. Every Sunday or whatever day that particular denomination goes to church on, it's just a habit. So maybe your friends belong to that liberal category of Christians.
When you talk against the country, it is treason anyway. So why? I think we Hindus, you're right. We have tolerated so much. Our chalta attitude is what has, given rise to all this convergence and rising popularity of Christianity. Another thing I want to ask is, what is it about Christianity that it has had so much mass appeal? What I mean is that our Sanatan Dharam is so perfect and so much logic and, good teachings, but we have not been able to carry this message to the world. But the world has lapped up Christianity. Of course, Muslims, they have converted forcefully, but what I mean is voluntarily. There was this joke about Africa. They said the missionaries came with the Bible and Africans had all the resources. And when they left, they had all the resources and the Africans were caught with the Bible. But it's true, all they say Jesus will save you. And I don't know what is the belief, because I'm sorry to say, but Jesus could not even save himself from crucifixion. So how has this religion got so much mass appeal in the whole world? Why we don't have that? That's what I want to know.
Because Hinduism does not, Sanatan Dharma does not believe in, it's a self-discovery, it's a self-learning, self-realization kind of philosophy, right? Sanatan Dharma, whereas Christianity and Islam, especially Christianity, it's a theological mandate for every Christian to go out and talk about Christianity and convert people. Allegedly, Jesus has said that himself in the Bible, go out and make disciples, go out and convert people. But so it is with that theory. I mean, we don't know who wrote that. It could be that the people that have invented Christianity themselves wrote that particular aspect. But if you look at it as a religious scripture, it is a religious mandate. There is no such mandate for Hinduism. It's an individual journey.
Yeah, I know that. Yes, they are. But you see, that time it was a very primitive and barbaric world. If you recollect, when Muhammad was also born, it was very, very like Jahil log the. That's what they say. So okay, to bring some discipline and order, and they did not obviously know about our Sanatan Dharam. Otherwise, they would. And I don't know why, but I feel Jesus himself was crucified by the Romans. So how come the Romans took up Christianity? That is one thing I never understand.
Okay, there are two aspects to it. Whether it was written just like that without no history behind it, or did it really happen like that? So if, let's take, for argument's sake, let's say it really happened like that, like how the Bible says it did. So the Bible says that because the Jews demanded that Jesus be crucified, because Jesus was this guy who came onto the scene all of a sudden out of nowhere, and he says that this is a new covenant, or this is a new testament that I'm giving you. The Old Testament is gone. So he was actually challenging the Jewish beliefs. So the Jews wanted him killed. The Romans simply executed the demand from the majority. It was a Greco-Roman world with a lot of population from the Jewish community. So the Jews were a good majority. So the Bible says that, and even Christian history today says that the Jews demanded Roman church simply, not Roman church, the Roman Empire simply executed that and fulfilled their demand. So that is what the narrative is. So how did Romans become Christian? So from the resurrection, presuming it is true, from the resurrection to the time Christianity became a big movement or a big religion where there were a lot of people converted to Christianity, it was mid 4th century, 325 CE. When Constantine became the emperor, he saw that he wanted to consolidate his empire, which was fragmented on the basis of religion. So he wanted to consolidate his empire. He was a pagan. He was a sun god worshipper to his dying day. But he made Christianity an official religion simply because he was an ambitious politician. So then he thought that the wise thing to do would be to make Christianity the official religion, and that is when he could consolidate his empire. So to for political reasons, he made Christianity the official religion. Not that he embraced Christianity, but because there were a lot of converts. And as I said, when the numbers increase, they dictate state policy. Vote bank, that is what we call in simple terms. So the Christians were a vote bank back then. So he had to make Christianity the official religion.
Esther ji, namaste. Thank you so much for the session. I have watched a couple of your videos and I do find them very informative, because I think when you speak not just as a person who has followed Christianity in the past, but if I'm not wrong, you're also a Christian apologist. I think that's how they pronounce it probably. Is it okay if I ask you a question a bit from the history, maybe for my better understanding? If it is okay, because I'm not very sure if it is directly linked to today's topic. So if you're okay, I will proceed.
Yeah, please go ahead and ask. Let me see if I can answer that.
Sure. So Esther ji, there is this nice documentary. I can't vouch for the authenticity of it, which talks about this, who is this Jesus as a person and how this cult rose. Wherein they talk about this family in Caesar's court, I think Flavian family, wherein they talk about Titus and his father, I think Vespian or Vespa, something like that.
Vespian.
Yeah. And they talk about this whole part wherein this started when the Roman emperor wanted people to accept the emperor also as a divinity along with their own god. So they had no problem with polytheistic beliefs as long as the emperor is also worshipped. And there it talks about the whole Messiah movement which was happening, started by Jews, how it was quelled. And then when Vespian ascended the throne, they probably wanted a story to tell people that now emperor is the main divinity. And hence this whole this talk about someone who traveled, not probably Vespian, his son, when he ascended the throne, he tried to convince his courtiers and nobility that his father was actually Jesus, or at least a prophet, and he is the son. Hence comes the father and the son. And then it talks about the fact that how if you go through the Josephus history and Bible side by side, you will find a lot of similarities. So you can see where they picked up the material from. When you were trained to defend Christianity or its belief, were you ever taught about this part or how to defend when someone talks about this?
Apologetics is all about defending the Christian theology, defending the doctrines, defending the historicity. In fact, there is no question of defending the historicity. As a Christian, at least back when this was about 10, 11 years ago, when I was in school, there was, the historicity was not a big of a debate. The debate on historicity of Jesus was limited to scholarly circles. So it was not out in the open. An individual sitting like we are sitting today, there was no discussion. There was no doubting ever that Jesus existed or did not exist. There was no doubt that he existed. So what we are trained is basically to defend why Jesus is the only way to salvation, why Bible is the God's word, why resurrection is a historical event. So Jesus's existence was never a question. Although we were given to read the literature where we talk about the historical events that the Bible talks about. So most of the defense is about the doctrines, about the theology, about how Genesis, the event, Adam and Eve event, is true history. So this is what we are mostly taught. And whatever videos that we are watching about the historicity of Jesus, they are, I think, mostly about 6 or 7 years old, not more than that. I would give 5 or 6 years old. So there is a sudden explosion of this debate. It has come out of scholarly circles and come to an individual level or a lay person level, this whole discussion. But to answer your question, were we taught to defend Jesus's historicity? It was never a doubt, and not a straightforward defense. It was part of the defense on why the biblical events, the New Testament events, are a history. So does that answer your question, Jasodaji?
It does. Thank you. And if we have time, is it okay if I ask you a follow-up question? Tanya, again, if the time permits. Okay. So today, we had a couple of discussion on this forum itself where people came out and they said, when you look at the Christian conversion movement, which is happening in India today, it is very organic, which means these people look brown. So it is an India movement and there is no outside influence. But then just because the coolies are Indian doesn't mean that the thought is also, or at least the masters are also Indian. What are your thoughts on that?
This was in context of where the funding is coming from, or the conversion movement. No structure to it.
Yes. So completely, so this whole conversion, that includes fund, that includes the strategy, that includes the chart that they have. Do you think it's completely organic? It's completely all India made. There is no outside influence, because that is what people are arguing nowadays.
Yeah, I think I answered this in part. There's a mixture of both, especially with the FCRA rules changed, like foreign funding, foreign contribution laws changed. Since then, I think it's becoming difficult for Christian organizations to secure funds from foreign organizations. But when this movement was growing, most probably in 80s, most of 90s also, I think 85 to 90% of the organizations were funded by foreign organizations. Small, big, medium, all sizes of foreign organizations funded small, big, medium churches in India. But now the latest scenario is most of them are homegrown. Most of the churches or Christian organizations, well, not every Christian organization, Christian organization doesn't always necessarily mean they run a church. Like this apologetics organizations, there are Bible colleges. So any Christian organization, we cannot say that every one of them is foreign funded. There are many that are grown by funds, through funding from India. And a lot of wealthy people are Christians today. We have Agarwal Christians, we have, of course, Punjabi Christians, and even within Telugu community, we have the wealthy communities like Reddys and Kammas becoming Christian. So Christians are wealthy today. It's not like they're all laborers or they're all from rural areas or economically backward communities. So the church has a lot of fund at home, in India itself.
Saji, one last question from my end, since I want to understand a little better. So when you say that about Constantine, and when he embraced this as an official religion, then it's the same strategy that is repeated everywhere, right? You go against the wealthy majority, which are the Jews there, and you convert them into a new thing, and then it also takes over the political. So the example is set here. You have the Hindus that you take over and you try to convert, and then you take over the state. So this is replicated everywhere, wherever there is a kind of a majority that you. So it's also kind of a political tool, which you've already mentioned, and that's how they get the sanction from there that we are supposed to do this everywhere, and then we get a hold on the politics also. That is one observation which I think you already mentioned that, so there's nothing to clarify. But the second point is that when you said that in the Bible it's written that even your faith is a mustard seed and I can embrace you. So here there is a kind of a pastors or the church that has taken over the laity, and they don't know the Bible that much, but these people interpret and put it across such a way, so they have a lot of control over the people, much more than what the Christian faith is. But it's the pastors and the church that is running according to their own interpretations most of the time. Is that a right observation?
Absolutely, yes. That's why we call there is a Christianity and there is a churchianity. So, what the world is following today, most of the places, is churchianity. It's the interpretation of the pastors of the Christian religion and the scripture that is being followed today. So
that's why we see the church losing hold in many Western countries, because people are getting to know it on their own and reading whatever there's. But here,
here they don't read. First of all, ask any Christian how many verses he has read from the Bible, how many chapters or how many books from the Bible he has read. He or she has only read to the extent that the pastor has told them or the pastor has preached about in the church.
And I would like you to talk about the Gita University project that you're taking up with strings and this other thing, to explain it in a simple way to people what exactly you are trying to do through that.
In one line, the goal is to have about 5 billion people embracing Gita by 2050. So that's the long-term goal. To do that, the whole of 2022, we are raising funds for establishing a Gita University. Now, if you want to educate 5 billion people about Gita, there has to be an establishment. So we are coming up with, at least we aspire, we desire to come up with a Gita University, and where we will train 1,000 gurus. 1,000 gurus will be trained on that university. So the 1,000 gurus need not come from, they're not all Indians. They come from around the world. And to be able to train 1,000 gurus in Bhagavad Gita, there has to be establishment, of course, and a lot of resources for that. And the committee will be of 108 members. So the infrastructure is also to house those, the committee members, the staff, the gurus, and anybody who wants to learn Gita. So for this, we need an infrastructure. 2022 is going to be a fundraising year. And we also, in the video that we recently released, giving out information about the university, we have talked about how one can contribute without feeling the pinch on the pocket. So this is about, for 20 months, a person commits to contribute 500 rupees a month for 20 months. So at the end of 2022 or beginning of 2023, we will begin the construction of Gita University. So right now we are also looking for procuring land. So we are looking at a 100-acre campus for this. So I want people to have this goal in mind. It's not just my goal. It's not just String's goal or our founder, Mr. Anand Reddy's goal. This is the goal of Bharat. This should be the goal of every Bharatiya, I feel. So this is the only way. I don't know, I mean, how many people here know the value of what Bhagavad Gita is, but this is the only way the world can be brought back to the path of Dharma. So this is one text. If you look at it, if you read it, practice it, implement it in your life, you don't have to look anywhere else. So that is our understanding of the Bhagavad Gita.
Thank you so much, Esther ji. Now, all of us, when we, the reason I asked you to talk about it, because we talk about the problems and the issues and what we need to do, but what is being done, that also needs to be put across. And what you're doing, I think, is an affirmative action which we all are looking forward to support. And the objective of this Gita University is, I mean, when I watched the video on the Strings YouTube channel, it was basically that we need, since we are lacking and we are deracinated from our roots, therefore we don't have good people in the society, we don't have those aware people in the bureaucratic positions, and we don't have those aware people at the political level. So it goes from the ground till the top to first educate them at the bottom, to the root level, so that they can be aware citizens and they can help hold the government responsible. So it will become a proper Ram Rajya, if you have to say. That's where this base is, the Gita and our other ancient texts, which has to be passed on for us to become a solution-based society. So that is the solution that very rightly Esther ji and the other members have taken up.